Hi, I'm Katie Payne, and this is my overview of the Zodiac Killer's potential and definite cases. The Zodiac Killer of the late 60s into the late 70s was described by survivors as masked, with brown hair, a crew cut, stocky build, broad shoulders, a heavy walker, and glasses. He was a known psychopath and once said, "I like killing people because it is so much fun." The very first confirmed case was the murder of two high school seniors, Linda Edwards and Robert Dominguez. They were engaged in attending Lompoc High School in Santa Barbara, California. On senior ditch day, the two of them decided to go lay out in the sun at Gaviota State Park. When the two of them didn't return home the next day, Robert's dad went looking for them. He found their bodies in a shack near the water lying together. They were both tied up with bullet wounds. Robert was shot 11 times and Linda 9. It was a .22 caliber gun with Winchester Western Super X bullets. Forensic analysts found that the two of them had been tied up and shot. They were then dragged to an abandoned shed, laid next to each other. The attacker then tried to set the shack on fire, but failed. The first potential victim was 18-year-old Sherry Josephine Bates, who was brutally murdered near Riverside City College's library. This was right before Halloween, and she was killed with a knife. The killer had managed to lure Bates by disabling her lime green Volkswagen Beetle, and then he waited for her to return to her car. 1 month after the murder, newspapers and the police department received typewritten letters titled "A Confession" from someone who claimed to be the killer. The author wrote, "Miss Bates was stupid. She went to the slaughter like a lamb," and added, "I am not sick, I am insane." In April 1967, the newspaper and police, as well as Josephine Bates, her father, received virtually identical handwritten letters, which read, "Bates had to die. There will be more." The notes were signed with a symbol which resembled the letter Z, just like the Zodiac Killer. The next confirmed case was the death of Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday, who were on their first date together. They promised Betty Lou's parents that they'd be home by 11. Shortly after 11, passing motorists saw the Rambler, her car, and its occupants parked at a Lover's Lane spot along Lake Herman Road in Benicia, California. Another driver later drove by and saw two seemingly lifeless bodies on the side of the road. Police and others responded to the scene and discovered Betty Lou dead with 5 bullet wounds. David was found next to the Rambler with a bullet in his head, but he was still breathing. Investigators believe that the two teenagers were likely targets killed by a stranger for unknown reasons at the time. Yet another young couple was murdered, this time in Blue Rock Springs golf course parking lot. 19-year-old Michael Manjo and his friend, 22-year-old Darlene Farron, were sat in Farron's car when they were shot by an unidentified assailant. A brown Ford Mustang or Chevy Corvair drove in from the direction of Vallejo. The driver pulled up next to Farron's car, turned off his lights, and remained still for a moment. Then Manjo asked Farron if she knew the driver, and she replied, "Oh, never mind." At 12:40 that night, a call traced from a gas station made to the police department claimed responsibility for the shooting as well as the murders on Lake Herman Road. According to the police dispatcher, the caller spoke in a low, monotone voice and said, "I want to report a murder. If you will, go 1 mile east on Columbus Parkway. You will find kids in a brown car. They were shot with a 9mm Luger. I also killed those kids last year. Goodbye." Darlene died on arrival at the hospital, but Michael survived. All of these letters were sent in to various newspapers and police departments from the supposed Zodiac Killer. Some of them claimed responsibility for murders, some of them were ciphers, and they were taunting the police, begging for attention from the newspaper and the public. On a Saturday in late September, college students Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were relaxing along the shore of Lake Berryessa. A man appeared holding a gun and wearing a hooded costume, with a white crossed circle stitched across the chest. He had escaped from prison, he said, and needed money and a car to escape to Mexico. The strangers bound their wrists with pre-cut lengths of plastic clotheslines without warning. He plunged a large knife into Brian's back and stabbed Cecilia. He then used a pen to draw a cross circle on the door with the dates and locations of the earlier attacks. The date, September 27th, and time 6:30, by knife, as shown on screen. At 7:40 p.m., a man called the Napa Police Department to report a double murder. The caller described Brian's car, directed police to the scene of the crime, and confessed it. He said, "I'm the one who did it." Police traced the call to a payphone at a car wash in Napa. Cecilia died 2 days later, but Brian survived. On the car door was a message of 2 shootings. Sherwood Morrill, the California Department of Justice documents examiner, concluded that the door message was written by the author of the Zodiac letters. Paul Stine was a 28-year-old student and husband who worked as a cab driver in San Francisco. One night he picked up a man who wanted to head to upscale Presidio Heights neighborhood. At an intersection, the passenger shot Stine in the head and removed a piece of his shirt. The man walked away just before police arrived, but the police radio broadcast mistakenly described the suspect as a black man, and passing officers dismissed a white man resembling the correct description. Fingerprints found on the driver's side of the cab may have belonged to the killer, and a sketch was produced based on descriptions provided by witnesses. The case was considered a routine robbery until the office of the San Francisco Chronicle received an envelope with a letter from the Zodiac, which began with the words, "I am the murderer of the taxi driver." The envelope also had a blood-stained piece of Paul Stine's shirt. The Zodiac denied he left fingerprints and claimed the police sketch was inaccurate because he had worn a disguise. 2 days after Stine was murdered, the Zodiac sent in a letter mocking police for not catching him and threatened to shoot children on a school bus. The envelope had a piece of blood-stained shirt belonging to the victim of Paul Stine. Shown here are several more correspondences made by the Zodiac killer in the span of November to December of 1969. The next potential victim was Kathleen Johns, who was pregnant as well as her infant daughter. She was on the highway when a vehicle pulled alongside her in a station wagon, and the driver appeared to signal that Kathleen should pull over. Instead of fixing his car like he offered, he actually loosened the lug nuts. As Kathleen tried to drive away, the man offered to drive her instead because she couldn't. She climbed in his car, and then he made claims about threatening her and her daughter. Eventually, Kathleen grabbed her daughter and jumped from her car. A passing driver took Kathleen to a nearby police station where she named the stranger from a police sketch of the Zodiac. Months later, a Zodiac letter mentioned a rather interesting ride with a woman and her baby. From April to July of 1970, several more letters, as well as depictions and supposed murders, were claimed by the Zodiac killer to newspapers and police departments. The third potential victim was Donna Lass, who lived in South Lake Tahoe and was a nurse for the Sahara Hotel and Casino. On September 6, 1970, she went missing. A man called her work as well as her property owner and said she had to leave town due to a family emergency. Donna's family told authorities there was never an emergency, and the man was never found. Investigators suspect Donna was abducted and killed, but her body has never been located. Therefore, her name gets added to the lengthy list of possible victims of the Zodiac killer. These are some of the last confirmed letters sent by the Zodiac killer. Copycat killers are often suspected of some of these murders, and there's a list of about 10 potential suspects, all with reason and ability to commit these terrible crimes. It's clear through the correspondence with the police that the Zodiac was a psychopath who needed attention. Investigators have still not discovered who the actual Zodiac killer is. However, there have been many claims, and we hope to bring resolution and peace to these victims and their families someday.